share just what big time is, just at a really high level?
Not pay to win.
Yeah, I can jump in here while Nirvan finishes off his pretzels. The guy needs some carbs in the system to keep going. So Big Time is a MMORPG that is totally free to play and not pay to win. For users that are familiar with other popular games out there, we describe it as a mixture of World of Warcraft and Diablo 2. The similarity with with World of Warcraft is that each of the characters that you can play through as you're in Big Time are complementary, have varying strengths and weaknesses like speed and strength, so on and so forth. And then you need multiple people to play through a dungeon. And then the comparison with Diablo 2 is that there are multiple worlds inside the game, and in each world there are procedural dungeons where you play through those and you pick up loot as you beat enemy.
It is a game loop that I definitely enjoy a lot and have done through most of my life. So there's a lot of hype around Big Time for sure, and there's a lot going on, as Vigil said earlier. One of the things going on is the land sale. So must have been a big launch yesterday. A lot of excitement for everybody. Some of us know what these launches are like, so good times, I'm sure. Can you take us through some insights into what goes on behind the scenes, how everything's tracking, and sort of where things are at now?
Sure. So like, today we launched our Exalted sale, and that's for the Exalted and Mythic levels of Space. Sorry. So basically, the way Space itself works is it's kind of the cornerstone of our economy, where in order to create other NFTs, you'll need space. That's not to say that you can't play the game without space. The game is completely free to play, but in order to participate in the economy, you'll need space. And so the way the rarities are kind of working is that if you want to create rare NFTs, you'll need rare space to do so. So they're kind of associated. You can't make exalted NFTs with epic space, but you can make exalted NFTs with epics or with exalted space. Jesus Christ, sorry. But from like a player perspective, that's the ones we sold today, exalted and mythic. And we had a couple of issues at the beginning of the sale where there's a lot of people on the site. We even had to delay it 24 hours. But that's kind of like one of the perils of having so many followers, I guess. Like, I think there's not been a single sale where we didn't crash the site, whether that's like on OpenSea, our site, Binance. Like, we've literally crashed every single site that we've had a sale on.
I love that. That's such a great flex. We've crashed every site that we've had a sale on, and I think that might well be true. And of course, you're hoping. I have no doubt that that sale's gonna truck along. I wanted to ask, actually, are there going to be any more land sales? Sort of going into your launch. I mean, I think I don't want to stitch you guys up here, but I think you're probably planning to launch around the middle of the year or something like that.
Sure.
Are we going to expect more land sales going into launch?
So early access will be starting sometime in Q2. We're looking at like the tail end of April. In terms of like actually having more sales before then, we won't be having more sales before the end of April. More land sales.
Cool. Yeah, huge. Excited for land too, and how the land's going to factor into this. And definitely, I think we'll have some more questions a little bit later on about land. But I wanted to know a little bit more, kind of hopping into just the general game. Now, I think the cool thing with Big Time is, I guess, the universe that you have created. I think very successful games do well at creating successful universes. Like you can kind of lose yourself in a specific game. And from what I've seen and we've seen and some sneak peeks and teasers, Big Time has created a really, really cool thing. So along with the storyline, which features some fun historical figures as well. So I'd love to know a little bit from the Big Time perspective, if you could explain the story of Big Time. When a player hops into the game, how do they fit into the Big Time universe, and what is the universe kind of all about?
So there's the overall premise is that at some point in the future, society has developed an ability to travel back and forth in time, and that ability to travel back and forth in time is dominated by Paradox Corporation. And on vacation, you can go to Paradox Corporation, travel back and forth in time wherever you want. But there's something to suggest that Paradox is doing something nefarious in and around time, and that's causing time to collapse. The players are playing on the side of Evermore Academy, which is one of the worlds is called Epic City, and Evermore Academy is basically where the good guys are at. And that's where a bunch of characters from throughout time and history, like Albert Einstein, they all meet up in this one spot, and they're there to counteract the negative influence of Paradox Corporation. And so there's a variety of places you can do that. There's several worlds that are going to be released. 5 worlds, actually, to be exact. We call them timeshares, and users travel around to each one of those timeshares and then fight the Paradox Corporation personnel that they find there. So that's the kind of like high level like lore behind Big Time.
That's great, and we've sort of seen a little bit of the gameplay now in some of the demos if we've been lucky enough to get access to them, which was great. And you spoke earlier around how there is some similarities with Diablo, a game very close to my heart. What other sorts of games, for those listening that might be able to draw a parallel, would you relate Big Time to? What other familiar sorts of either game styles or notable brands would relate to this one?
So the game style, like when you're playing through it, I probably would stick with World of Warcraft um, and Diablo. There are components of Big Time that have parallels inside of other games. For example, the fact that it's like totally free to play and that the cosmetics have no effect on gamer stats is very similar to what Fortnite veterans have seen and enjoy. That component translates well. And then it's a PVE game for right now. That's what Big Time is. There are plans kind of in the future to move it towards a PvP where there's tournament style. But it's a overall it's like you're playing through multiple worlds with multiple different types of dungeons. And so there isn't quite like another game that parallels it perfectly, but there are definitely components of it that have aspects in other games that are out right now.
Awesome, very interesting. So let's actually sort of peel back a layer here. So you're playing through various worlds, and you talk about it being PVE. Can you talk to us about the classes? Assuming there are specific class types, and sort of how do they differ in the gameplay available to each class type?
Yeah. So there's 4 class types. The Chronomancer, Quantum Fixer, Time Warrior, and the Shadow Blade. And each one has different strengths and weaknesses. So, for example, the Chronomancer, he has magic, precision, and he has ranged destruction, but he's not as powerful as the Time Warrior, who has like aggression and brute force on his sides. When you play through a dungeon, you can change between any one of those 4 characters, and you can change it midway through a battle if you wanted to. So in that regard, it's a little bit different than a lot of MMORPGs, where once you pick a character, you're pretty much committed to that one. In this one, in Big Time, like you can change them mid battle, mid dungeon.
Which is super duper sick, and that's going to actually aid to a lot of the strategy and I guess different play styles, because you could have multiple play styles for the same person, which I think is cool. And that's going to obviously depend on, I mean, the dungeon that you're in and the game modes that you're going to be playing through. Are there any game modes that I guess you can sneak peek, tease, or share with the with the listeners here?
So what we've released so far has all been demos from one of the worlds that we call Time's End. Um, that's only one of the 5 that will be released to the general public in that first iteration. One of the things that like users of Big Time can look forward to is we have about 5 years worth of releases already built or sketched out in some capacity. So like when we release Big Time, it's not just Big Time in 2022, it's Big Time all the way through 2027. So more worlds to explore, more dungeons, But then also, as you play through the same dungeon, even on the same world multiple times, we use this thing called procedural generation that basically means that the loot, the enemy, and various other components of that dungeon are different each time. So that way you can play this game over and over and it's never going to be the same experience for that same user.
No, that's so sick. And again, just that partnered with the ability to be able to change your role midway through battle, like we'll just I don't know, there's gonna be like a lot of gameplay to get out of this. And a lot of cool features too. Now this game obviously, it's there's dungeons, there's like running around, there's your headquarters where your Albert Einstein is guiding you. You've got your guilds. There's so much going on in this game. Can you give some insight into like I guess maybe core features that this game has that users are going to experience, have fun with, and any new features that you might be working on, new features that you might be implementing, or some cool things that Big Time has that you can share, obviously in the works for future versions of the game and leading up to launch.
Yeah, so Big Time appeals to a wide variety of like good gamers. So for gamers that are looking for like a communal areas where you can meet new people, there's the open world aspect of Big Time where you can do that. In fact, one of the entire world's Epic City, which is where Evermore Academy is based out of, is totally non-combat oriented. And so for users that are like, hey, I want to stake out some areas, I want to meet up, I want to do other kind of like cool things that are outside of the dungeons. There's multiple places for that. For users that are very focused on like combat oriented type gameplay, that's what the dungeons are for. And so there's kind of both aspects in there, and users can kind of choose their own adventure about how much they want to balance between those two. There's a couple things inside of Big Time that I think we do pretty uniquely, but for especially for the NFT audience personnel that are out there, um, the fact that the marketplace and skins and weapons are completely generated um, by users themselves, we think is pretty unique, and you can control the rarity with that as well. That's pretty different than a lot of other games that are out there right now. But it's a result of the blockchain technology and then incorporating it into a game that's basically this is the first time that users can do that.
And this is tied into the crafting process, is that right? And that's going to be done in your home base on your land. Can we maybe talk a little bit more around crafting and some of the detail around how you will do that, what you will need, how long it will take? Have you got any of that information that can be shared?
Yeah, so to craft your own NFTs, you do need space, and inside of space, you need to have forges and armories. And for your audience that's not as familiar with what space is, the best way I could describe it is like adding rooms in a castle. And the more rooms you have, the more things you can fill it with. Um, those things can be, your like your forges, your armories, or your hourglasses. Um, so users can create those types of NFTs. We call them brand NFTs, which are the cosmetic based, and they put them onto the market, and then they can trade them, they can sell them, they can buy them, they can use them. They own those things, and they can use it inside the game, or they can take it on chain if they wanted to and put it onto OpenSea or whatever it is that they want to do for it. For for users that don't want to engage in like NFTs or blockchain at all, Big Time is still free to play and not pay to win. So even if you spend no money in it, those you can still compete at the highest levels of Big Time. And that's super important for us because we really wanted to appeal to like gamers first.
Interesting. And one thing I picked up there, well, two things. The hourglass, I'm interested to hear a little bit more about. But the crafting then is a cosmetic based crafting. So this is really to make your character look cool with some of the elite recipe drops that no doubt they'll pick up along the way. Whereas the in game drops, I'm assuming, are going to be more the attribute based drops. Is that correct, or is there a nuance there?
There's a blend. So the drops in game can be NFTs. They can be cosmetic NFTs. They can be things like space, which is a utility NFT. But for things that affect the player stats, so like your ability to heal, to level up, those are going to be non NFTs, and anybody can do that. There is a thing inside of Big Time called an individual collection path. So, for example, let's say Mystic7 and I are playing through a dungeon, and Mystic7 has an hourglass with full sand enabled, and he defeats an enemy, and that enemy drops the big time token. You could pick it up, but if I don't have an hourglass with sand enabled, I could not pick it up. So the collection path will look a little bit differently based on how involved the user wants to be with the big time economy.
Interesting.
Awesome.
So the NFTs then inside this game, we've got more cosmetic based ones, we've got more attribute based ones, we've got land, which is NFTs. What other types of NFTs are we expecting are going to be within this ecosystem, within this universe? We're going to see pets. We're going to see vehicles. Can you share? Are there any other leaks potentially you could drop on us?
Yeah, so broadly they fall into two categories: brand and utility. The brand are the things that are inside, like cosmetics, which don't affect your individual gameplay. The utility are the ones that allow you to either create NFTs or to pick them up or to pick up the big time token. You know, where you're talking about like, pets, stuff like that, individual areas, with the initial release, the focus is on the cosmetic ones. So things like chess pieces, weapons that don't affect stats, so on and so forth. But where we go after the initial release and onboarding is very much going to be driven by our community. There's a lot of different ways that big time can go. But if we're seeing like, hey, you know what, people really like this is what players want to see next, and that's where we're going to go, right? PvP could be first. Oculus lenses could be up there. A lot of it is going to be driven by our community, and that's why we're so active right now with reaching out to our community prior to release, so we can set those things in motion for where big time goes next, so that we build something that the players really want to be involved with long term.
Let me just pull on that string just a little here. So, I mean, look, it's awesome that you talk about engaging the community, and at the end of the day, Web3 is ultimately all about community. How are you, I suppose, going to allow the big time community at large to engage with and potentially influence, the game sort of in the mid to long term? Are there plans for that? Don't let me stitch you up, of course, if there aren't.
Are you like suggesting in terms of like a governance token or something like that?
Perhaps, I just wanted to see if you had anything uh, in the plan in general.
Yeah. So I guess there's a couple of ways that we do that. One, I mean, we're very active across all of our social media right now, and like getting feedback on the game, and like working through troubleshooting problems, as well as like getting feedback on the things we are doing well. So we've always had like a very open dialogue with our community. Um, the focus for the next, 2 quarters is really going to be on finishing the game that's out there, and then making sure it gets onboarded successfully, so that we can ramp up as we go from, the initial release of 1,000 unique users during the gold pass up to, multiple levels of that. But at least on a personal perspective, as I've like started to engage with like other partners who want to get involved with big time, I personally have been like shocked at like the innovation that has come out and been suggested of like, hey, have you guys thought about doing this, or have you thought about doing that? There's some really unique insights that we would not have gotten had we not spoken kind of individually with them. What I can tell you is, more concretely, is Big Time is a studio. Big Time is not just the Big Time game. Like, Big Time was launched with the aspiration of generating multiple games, and then having those games all be connected under the umbrella of Big Time itself. So there's a lot of interoperability that Big Time was launched with that we definitely want to incorporate on. Um, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
No, it does, and thank you for sharing. So that's actually pretty interesting, and that means we're gonna have more future releases to look forward to from Big Time. So that's really awesome, and I'm looking forward to that. I just want to circle back to, I suppose, the spaces and sort of land in Big Time. You know, can you explain sort of how land functions, and are we going to be able to essentially build a home for ourselves? And how can and I suppose how will purchasers, I suppose, see their investment in I suppose land influence their gameplay in sort of the mid to long term?
Yeah. So for the more visually oriented listeners that are out there, check out our Instagram page, and that's where we have some artistic renditions of what space looks like. Um, Space is an individual area that's non-contiguous. So it's not like when you're running around in one of the worlds that you can like run across, Vigil.eth's individual space and then run up there, play Ding Dong Ditch, and run away. That's not really on the table. The 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 space is very much for the user and what you choose to do with it, and it's a private space. So if you want to invite in another user, you can, but it's not like you're running by and you would see it. You have to invite them into it, and it's for those of you who are Diablo veterans. It's similar to a chest where you store certain items, but obviously quite a bit more complicated, more moving parts. Um, when you have space, it allows you to create NFTs and to pick up the big time token. So I guess for users that are not as familiar with like gaming, think excuse me, not as like familiar with like blockchain type gaming, think about other problems that you would look back on current big AAA rated games. So for example, let's say you spend a lot of money on a skin in Fortnite. You don't own that skin in the sense that you can take it off of that game and then sell it somewhere else or even really do anything with it. Well, that's what blockchain allows you to do. You can truly transfer ownership. And if you look at other things inside of like big games, like within this metaphor, skins, right? Users generally can't make skins that they can then put on a market and then buy or sell. Well, that's what land, or excuse me, space inside of big time allows you to do. So it allows a lot more like user creativity to create a market, to be both the supply and the demand for it, and then to really transfer that ownership to users in a way that's not really possible before blockchain.
I think that's sick, and I also think the. Oh, sorry, Vigil.
No, sorry about that, Mystic. I fat fingered my mic button. All over to you, my friend.
Okay, no worries. That's sick. And then also, I know we kind of moved away from it, but the concept of interoperability has been one of the lesser attractive ones for me personally when it comes to like NFT and gaming, because I think it's hard to be like interoperable out of your like if you build an ecosystem and like a universe, taking your assets and putting it in someone else's universe, it feels unnatural, right? Because it's not part of it. But the fact that big time, you guys are looking at creating possibly multiple games and multiple products and those can all operate within each other. It sounds like that is really exciting. I think that is a good use case for interoperability, and that's cool to hear you guys talking about that. But speaking back on the NFTs, I know that the goal of this game is to be somewhat play to earn if you want to participate in that, but you're wanting it to be free to play and you want to avoid the pay to win strategy. And I think a lot of good games currently like like your Fortnite or like your Call of Duty and Valorant do well where they have very very vibrant I guess store ecosystems with skins and with emotes and stuff, but none of that really affects the gameplay beyond aesthetic. So when it comes to game balancing, when in terms of like NFT technology, are you guys looking at um, implementing ways to where you can strategically use space to have an edge in game, or are you really fully focusing on making sure that the NFT aspect and the marketplace aspect of the game does not affect skill based gameplay? I guess does that question make sense?
It does, and I can say very confidently, like there are no plans to have space or really money in any way be tied to a user's success or failure inside the game. No, it's very much a play and earn if you want to type of game, not so much play to earn. And a lot of that was looking at the negative examples we saw out there and kind of negative or perverse incentives with some of the ways that games were incorporating blockchain and pay to earn, which really incentivized users to take things out of the game, created very high barriers to entry for games, and all of that really built on relatively simple and not interesting gameplay. So Big Time saw that, and we were like, well, We're not going to do that. We're going to fix these problems. And then one of those things was making sure it remains free to play and not pay to win in any capacity.
I do like hearing that, and it kind of leans towards as well some of the players that are coming in that aren't NFT veterans. They don't have the history of what some of the rest of us do trading in this space, so they might also not have the bags to be able to afford some of the more expensive NFTs to get access to the land functionality. So for people coming in new, really fresh, maybe their first NFT. Are there sort of ways for them to earn NFTs as part of the game loop if they're coming in fresh? Or is access to the in game token then their path to start to acquire NFTs?
Short answer is, let's say you're not very experienced at all with NFTs and you just want to you just happen to download this game and that's it. You can still acquire NFTs inside the game. You can find space while playing. There are other types of NFTs inside the game that are going to really incentivize users who play a lot and enjoy the game and grind a lot to find those NFTs. And what they do with them afterwards, put them on the marketplace, hold on to them, mint them, whatever they want. That's going to be on that user. Because when we built Big Time, it was almost less with the avid hardcore NFT user in mind, as opposed to a gamer who is reluctant or skeptical about NFTs and doesn't quite get it, which is why we built a lot of things on Big Time to appeal to somebody who has no experience in NFTs. So, for example, let's say you wanted to buy your first NFT in Big Time, you can do that with a credit card. Very accessible, similar to what happens in other games. But there are components of Big Time where if you're a very sophisticated NFT holder and very into like blockchain, you can go through connecting your wallet, be a participant in the economy, take part in guilds, so on and so forth, where that component is there, but also with easier access for total novices in the area.
Interesting. And I do pick up, you mentioned going out and finding some of these more elusive NFTs. So will the loot pools be tied to certain events or bosses, and are there limitations to those loot pools? So is there going to be some rare NFTs sitting there waiting to be discovered, and then the flurry of activity to mint them out, and then they are no longer available? Or is there a different mechanic at play here?
So a couple components to that. So for things like space, we have a plan over the course of years to inject that into the game. You know, especially as we expand to more worlds and more dungeons, to put space out there so users who get there first and explore the most are the ones who find those, and that's going to be over a period of years. The loot pools, on that part, right? There's the individual collection path where if you have sand enabled, then you can use that to acquire the token while you're playing, and then consequently use that token even more on the marketplace. So there's that component as there as well. But yes, there are going to be NFTs scattered throughout the game. Some of it will be tied to how much you play, how much you grind, and then your probability of finding that throughout the world. But again, the focus is going to be on just creating an enjoyable game where people want to hang out, they want to spend time, and they want to have an enjoyable experience.
Awesome, very very interesting, and thank you for sharing. Let's talk. So let's talk tokenomics. So at a high level, first, I suppose, can you talk through, I guess, the play to earn, or I suppose you said, play and earn, the optional play and earn mechanism that's going to be available to players, just in totality.
Yeah, that's correct. So you wanted to just talk about like more play and earn, like how the token works, or is it just overall like how users can do the earning part?
So both, actually, I suppose. How does a user, you know, get into the play to earn mechanics of the game, and then subsequently what the tokenomics are.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways. I'll just describe a couple paths, and then and then I hope that answers the mail because maybe I can dive in more. All right, let's take a totally free user on one end of the spectrum, who is borrowing his parents' credit card for the first time. No, I'm just joking. Just borrowing. He has a credit card, and they're playing it for the first time, and they're like, I've never had an NFT, but I kind of want to get a skin. Let's say they're playing the game and they go out and they're playing a lot and then they find a space. And let's say it's a legendary medium sized space. And they're like, whoa, this is awesome. What do I do with this? Well, then they have that space. That's theirs. Okay, well, what do they do with it next? They have space. And their next step is like, okay, well, I want to keep playing. And well, now I want to get an hourglass. Okay, I'm going to fill it with an hourglass. Great. And now I'm going to fill it with sand. Okay, great. And now as I'm playing more in big time, I can start to collect the big time token. I find the big time token. Whoa, this is awesome. Each time I beat a boss, I pick up a couple tokens. What do I do with this token? Okay, well, I'm going to take it back to the marketplace. And hey, for example, 10 tokens, I can buy this chess piece. Okay, great. Now I'm going to take it back to my space and I'm going to take this rare chess piece and I'm going to make it a legendary chess piece, which is significantly more rare. And I'm going to play around. I'm going to wear it for a little bit. Okay, after a while, I don't like this thing anymore. I'm going for a black and purple vibe, and this thing is yellow. I want to sell this thing. Well, then they put it on the marketplace, and they get more big time tokens for it, and then they can proceed to use that to buy other things in the marketplace. So that's how like a total newbie could get involved in NFTs in big time. Well, let's look at the other end of the spectrum. Let's look at the biggest guild you can imagine. They buy a ton of space, and with their guild community, they decide to start collecting NFTs that they pick up through in-game play. Like, let's go back to that chess piece example, and they bring it back to their spaces, and they increase the rarity from, let's say, it goes from epic up to exalted, and then they put those things on the marketplace or let their users wear it. But then they kind of combine and pool their NFT collections across their entire guild. Guilds are obviously super proficient in NFTs and in-game tokens. So there's really kind of like a choose your own adventure of like how much you want to be involved in it, from totally new to the most experienced.
Interesting, and that's great info. I really like the example you provided there on someone coming in and how they get that first land and earn their first token. It's very helpful. So it does sound like there's going to be a gradual increase in the size of the NFT collection overall, and specifically the items are going to inflate. And this is something we've seen with other games like Axie in the past. And over time, it can be quite difficult to manage the value of that collection of assets. Is the intent for the value of assets to just be dynamic over time, and that's going to change, and people are going to need to always stay across what they're holding and what they're creating? There's some deflationary mechanics that you're thinking of implementing to help manage the ballooning nature of the NFT portfolio. Can you talk a little bit around that for us?
Yeah, so there's a couple components I think that jumped out to me from your question. In terms of like how we control pricing of the NFTs, that's really going to be driven by the marketplace. In terms of the items that are on there, what the buy, the sell prices, that's going to be driven by users. What we can control very concretely is the rarities of certain items. That's what we can control, and that's what's baked into space. So like something that is an exalted space can never be artificially kind of like increased in supply by making it rare. That is what we don't do. Like that is the ownership component of NFTs. And when you buy space and you start producing things with it, that is very much like baked into that smart contract of this is the rarity that's going to be associated with that type of item. And you can increase the rarity or decrease the rarity, but you need to have the correlating space with it to affect that, which is then controlled obviously by the fixed supply of 600,000 space that it's ever going to be released into big time.
Right, and that's good, like good pathway to the next question, the 600,000 space, you did mention that there doesn't look to be any land sales between now and launch, with the one that's ongoing from last night. Post launch, we're going to expect to see a similar trajectory for the release of that space, or is it going to be a very
Yeah.
slow grip?
So in terms of releasing space, we've maintained a good majority of it for actually receiving in the game. And so, like, when you think about how we want players to collect the space, we've allocated a good majority to make sure that the players who just want to grind it out can collect space through there. And that's what we kind of mean when the economy is discretionary. Where it's optional. You don't have to participate in these sales, because you will be able to collect the space itself through the gameplay. However, obviously, like if you don't have time and you just want the space, then yeah, you can purchase it through the marketplace.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. And with the remainder of the space available, the stuff that's been bought so far, the Mythic, the Exalted, etc., are those rarities fixed from now until the completion of all space being minted, or are we going to see some new types of rarities enter the market as the game launches?
So the quantities of like each space is going to be fixed, and that allocation has been released like well before kind of like launch. So we're not going to change those quantities after they're out, but how they're injected into the game is going to be a part of our injection plan into the game that we were going to be releasing a graphic on probably pretty shortly. I think we're definitely within like the next like 2 weeks. You'll be able to exactly see how we're phasing things into the game. That way, it just kind of gives user clarity of like, oh, I can expect to see these types of drops over this amount of time, and like I said before, that's going to take place over years.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, just before we leave the topic of tokenomics, I just want to pry a little bit deeper into the way tokens are going to be earned during the game loop itself. So you have the typical run and gun, moving between rooms, cleaning up creeps, and then you have sometimes a boss at the end, sometimes not. I'm sure there's other things that are going to happen during that loop. And then you have your home base, and you have your construction center in the home base. How in those two areas in the total game loop, where are tokens going to be earned? So what are the mechanisms for token earning themselves?
So all of the tokens are in the game and can only be earned from in-game play. And in that regard, that's pretty different than the way a lot of the blockchain games that are out there right now, where they were issued ahead of time, or they're tied to like governance, or um, the um, or like there's like something specially allocated for like the owners. So if you want to find the big time token, you got to play the game. And then when you find that token, you can use it in the in-game economy on the marketplace. So it's not earning in that sense. It's like you got to play it to want to do it, to use it. Now it is an NFT. So if you want to withdraw it to your wallet, you can. If you want to use it in the big time marketplace, you can. If you want to hold on to it and just admire how good it looks, you can do that too. And so in that regard, it's a little bit different than the way other blockchain tokens have been issued in the past.
And then, quick question: will this? Sorry if this has been answered already. Will this token be tradable on dexes? Will it require like a user-generated liquidity pool? Like, how will this token be traded amongst people?
So the primary way of trading it among people is going to be in that marketplace. So can a user withdraw it to their own wallet? Yes, they can. But the use for it is going to be inside the game, and how you use it inside the game. There's a variety of different ways, right? For example, you could use it to add sand into your hourglass, which allows you to then collect more tokens big time tokens as you play through the game. You can use it on the marketplace to trade for other cosmetic skins that are out there, like, hey, I've got 10 tokens and I really want to buy Mick's, gold chest police, and I think it looks really cool, and that's a trade, and we're good to go. And then that way you could use it in there as well. Did that make sense? Did that answer the mail on that one?
Yeah, I think we might have lost the connection a little bit at the end there, but we did get the main gist of it. Vigil, did you want to start digging into the guilds, maybe?
Yeah, this is super interesting. It's something that I'm personally incredibly passionate about understanding here. Can you share a little? I suppose let's talk high level and then we'll get into the nitty gritty. Can you talk to us about what guild dynamics looks like in big time? Right. So how will players be able to play together as a guild? Whether it's a huge like a huge guild like we have out there today, like YGG, or even a smaller guild, like let's say a group of friends, for example, who want to band together. How will players be able to play together as a guild, and how will resources be shared as a result?
Yeah, so there's a couple things on that one. So we have not published a ton on how guild like interaction interoperability works right now, and that is by design, um, because we want to make sure we get those guild interactions correct on a technical standpoint, right? So let's say there's a lot of concern like, hey, can I rent out my space to somebody else and then have them populate it and then I get it back? Yeah, we can do that. That's technically, on a blockchain programming level, pretty easy for us. It's really a lot of like permission stuff. But what we want to do is make sure those incentives for guilds are crafted in such a way that um, it's safe and secure for everybody, and that it still contributes to a positive user experience, for everybody in the guild as well as for non-paying users. Yes, we have been in contact with several guilds, who have like already started participating in the space sales, and there is a guild component of it. We do have a plan that we're going to be releasing here in the next couple weeks on that's going to answer more in those details on how guild dynamics work. I know this because I'm working on it as well. But that like exact nature of the relationship, we're just making sure, not only is it like legal, but it contributes to a positive user experience. We do feel pretty confident that guilds are going to like the way these dynamics work. It's a little bit different than the way things have been done in the past, but we're pretty confident they're going to like it.
That is exciting, and yeah, no, can't wait to see what's going on with that. And I like the guild aspect too because I think good games have good social dynamics built into them, and the guild feature in here seems like it has a lot more packed into it than just simple like guild. Guildonomics as we've seen so far, I guess, in the in the space so far. So let's say I have a guild or one of the guild owners has a lot of players who want to come in and join the game, and a lot of people who are itching to play big time. Does that mean that the guild needs to get a lot of passes for members, or how does that work? Larger guilds wanting to onboard larger amounts of players.
So those own internal like big time guild dynamics are largely going to be driven on, I guess, the governance of each respective guild. So how they choose to do that is going to be on them. But however they choose to kind of reallocate things inside of the game for whatever makes sense to people in their guild, then the at the end of the day, the gameplay still looks and feels the same, whether or not you're a part of a massive guild or if you're an individual user who's not paying anything. And so, having the space enabled with hourglasses and your sand activated and running through and picking up the tokens or NFTs or crafting inside of your space, all of that is still going to look the same. And part of that is we looked at the other big guilds in the gaming sphere and how they were kind of like negatively affecting like lower paying users and driving up prices in a way that's probably going to significantly negatively impact the sustainability of those games, right? Like pick a blockchain game, you can imagine the name, and if you're paying $1,000 just to start playing it casually, that's kind of rough. It's kind of unappealing. And guilds were largely, or excuse me, were a significant contributor to why that individual gameplay was so unenjoyable, which is why we're making sure when we put out our guild policies and finalize the game that we don't create those kinds of incentives.
Awesome. And in terms of how guilds are going to potentially unlock more of the community element to the game, and one of those big community elements that I remember from World of Warcraft were the many days spent getting up at extremely odd hours to join in with a number of people around the world to attempt to take down some pretty crazy bosses and some pretty detailed raids. And that was some of the best times in gaming, and I think people are really looking for that same type of experience with this new wave of NFT games. How are raids going to work inside Big Time? And are we going to have some pretty crazy 30, 40 man events, or are we initially sticking to more smaller instance based raids?
So the dungeons for right now are capped at 6 people, and if you're just a individual user who's like, I just want to play a game and enjoy myself, I'm going to be by myself. Well, then you can get populated with 5 other AI users to play along with you in the dungeon. So in that regard, we want Big Time to appeal from an individual user all the way up to like big teams. It's capped right now in the dungeons at 6 people, but in those open communal areas, you can see those big groups gathering together and like working together for kind of whatever their goals are. Um, One of the beauties of MMORPGs and like the metaverse in general is that this community really doesn't sleep, as I'm sure a lot of caffeine addicts that are listening in right now can probably attest to. Like in that regard, Big Time is no different, right? Like it doesn't sleep. Um, if you want to play at 1 o'clock in the morning to link in with your friend, and halfway across the world, you can do that and you can play through it. And if you don't even have like a friend over in that part of the world, you can get matched with them on a server. And it takes some of those kind of more, for people of like my generation that grew up like with consoles and LAN parties. There's definitely still that component where you can really get immersive, get into an immersive game experience and enjoy it with people across the world.
That's awesome. I really look forward to seeing how that side of things evolve, because when we talk about on-chain MMOs, I think there's really a lot that can be done there, but there's going to be some extreme challenges as well, I'm sure. So, thanks for helping us understand a little bit more around the guild dynamics. Are there any considerations for how guild earnings may work? Is there any influence around guilds and the tokenomics? Any link between those two, or is it very much just each individual player manages their own bag?
So the how guilds choose to manage themselves, that's very much on them. Big Time is we're committed to putting out a game, and then doesn't matter if you're that individual user or big guild, like you're accessing the same type of gameplay. Um, what you do need to do, regardless of whether or not you're a guild or an individual user, is if you want to collect that token in the game, you got to have an hourglass and fill it with sand. And to do that, you do need space, or you're acquiring it like on the marketplace. So that is how guilds are going to get after that. Each one's gonna do it slightly differently and build their own communities around it. If that makes sense. I think we got time for probably just a couple more questions and have to probably wrap up here soon.
Yeah, no problems. We do only have a couple left, so it's pretty decent timing, and we'd like to provide an opportunity for the listeners to also ask a few questions. So trying to close it out, we had a couple of questions around DLC. So if I try to summarize this, is there going to be a subscription element to the game ongoing, and how will that potentially tie in with DLC? And seasonal content?
Nope. So no plans for DLC right now. Going back to that core thing of Big Time is totally free to play, not pay to win, and so like all those future worlds that I mentioned, like the 5 years of onboarding into it, that's going to be available to all users.
Okay, and the final question is platforms. So available on PC. Is there any intent? What other platforms are going to be accessible on launch and in the roadmap?
So it's going to start off as a PC game. If you have a Mac, you're going to struggle a little bit to play through it. I think there's some technical ways you can make it happen. But as somebody else in the company once said, when I brought up like, hey, can I play this on my Mac? They told me get a real computer. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, right now it's just on PC. We do have plans in the future to move it on to other platforms.
Is mobile one of those platforms? I'm a mobile gamer, a little biased there.
It's been in the discussions, yeah, but really, like, it's going to go back to a lot of what that community really wants and what they're pulling for. But the focus over the next couple quarters is making sure the core game is successful and everybody's having a good time.
Wow, awesome. Now I'm sure we have some questions that we're going to bring up from the audience. I know we're at 3:52 right now. I personally do have to bounce out though, so thank you, MVHQ, for having me up and allowing me to come and ask some questions and chill. And big time, guys, team, squad, very excited. This is one of the games that I'm most excited for going into this new, I guess, era of the Web3 video game space. So best of luck to you and the team, MVHQC in the freaking Discord, my DGens, and everybody listening. I hope you guys are excited for the game big time. Take care, guys.
Hey, it was great talking with you.
Awesome. Take it easy, Mystic, and we'll see you next time. Let's go now into some audience questions. If you've got some questions for the big time team are hanging out here with us today, I think we've probably got time realistically for about 2 questions. So if the lovely Poop on the Metaverse HQ account just has a look, if you want to get up here and ask the team a question, feel free to pop your hand up now, and we'll get you up here. All right, Aslook here. What's happening, my man? How you doing?
Hey guys.
What's your question for the
Hey
team?
guys, how we doing? So first off, thank you so much for what you guys have done for MBHQ and in partnership, and then also, the game that you guys are producing seems awesome, and if our peers are saying that, that means it's true, no doubt about it. Where I'll be honest, where I'm struggling a little bit, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is a little bit of just what feels like asymmetry, let's call it, on the investment side of things, where initial land buyers, are kind of the initial investors in this thing, right? So the expectation is there would be some kind of returns, be it in immediate staking, be it in some kind of rewards. It's kind of like that, and the fact that people that are putting a decent amount of money into the game, that it almost sounds like there's, because it's play and earn, like limited expectation that there would be some kind of parallel rewards that would exist. And so where I'm struggling with is like a little bit of what feels like asymmetry between the initial investors and the incentive structures that exist. So I'd love to hear maybe just a little bit more of your guys' thoughts there.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So yeah. Like the way Matt kind of described it is there's 2 ways we categorize NFTs: utility and brand. The issue is, like, when you look at a lot of other crypto projects, they're brand NFTs. They're just PFP projects. They give those PFPs utility by like doing quote unquote airdrops. And as a team, we've entertained the idea of an airdrop. In fact, just recently on March 20th, or like March 23rd, actually, we announced, like, if you owned Exalted Space on March 20th at like a certain timestamp, you were given a Ruby Pass. So when it comes to space and like purchasing space, the way we see it is that like the direct utility from that is going to be able to create other NFTs and sell those into the marketplace, right? And so even pricing, when we think about that, the participation in the sales is completely discretionary, in the sense that you can participate in the sale, but if you don't want to and you just want to grind out and collect space through playing the game, you can do so as well. The issue is, we recognize that could take a long time, right? Like we recognize, like, if you're looking for an exalted or mythic space in the game, it's a 2% of space is exalted. It's going to take a while to get that. So we recognize people don't have all the time in the world. If they wanted some space, and they don't have time to kind of grind out in the game, they can purchase it through the marketplace. I hope that answers your question. But like in terms of, you know, the simplicity of space is kind of what A, gives it the mainstream aspect, but B, like you don't need staking or anything when there's a very clear utility to the space.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's unfortunately, to cut this short. We're coming up on 7 p.m. I think that'll probably be the last question we're able to answer for tonight. But thank you all for your time, and thank you MVHQ for hosting. Thank you Mick, Virgil, and thank you Matt for your time. For those of you that are interested in learning more about Big Time, you can head over to bigtime.gg. Our Discord is discord.gg/bigtime. Twitter is just @playbigtime. And then for those of you interested in learning more about the space sale, you can head over to nft.bigtime.gg.
You got it. Thank you again, Nirvan on the Big Time account. And of course, a very big thank you as well to Matt as well. Thank you for spending the time with us. We really appreciate you. As Nirvan said, make sure you check them out at Play Big Time on Twitter. And of course, I think, for most of our listeners, y'all already know Big Time are absolutely a release to look forward to. So on that note then, and to my lovely co-host Mick, and of course, big shout out to Mystic as well. Big love and to all of you Metaverse HQ fam listening in as well. Take care, and we'll see you next time.